My name is Boyd. I'm 62 years old. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early December. While I was sitting out on my back porch with the first cup of coffee I'd earned after 34 years of walking mail routes through every kind of weather Spartanburg, South Carolina could throw at a man, my daughter-in-law's mother was on the line. By the time she finished speaking, I had set my mug down on the porch rail so carefully that you'd have thought it was made of something fragile. Boyd, she said, and the way she said my name, flat and precise, like a word chosen rather than spoken, I think it would be better for everyone if you didn't come to Saturday's dinner. I sat with that for a moment. A cardinal landed on the fence post across the yard, the same post I'd repaired with my own hands the previous spring. The coffee was still warm. Better for everyone, I said. Not a question, more of an echo, the way you repeat something back when you want to make sure you heard it right. She kept her voice pleasant, said it was going to be a more formal gathering than originally planned. Her husband Harrison had invited some business associates from Charlotte. The atmosphere, she said, choosing that word with care, the way a person lifts a piece of china to check for cracks, requires a certain kind of conversation. I'm sure you understand. I told her I did. We said goodbye. I set the phone face down on the porch rail and I sat there until the cardinal flew off and the coffee went cold. Before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you who I am. Not what I did for work, who I am. I spent 34 years as a letter carrier for the United States Postal Service. I walked the same routes through this city in July heat that came up off the asphalt in waves, in February ice that made every driveway a negotiation, in the kind of October rain that soaks through a uniform in the first 10 minutes and stays there the rest of the shift. I knew which houses had dogs and which had new babies. I knew when a disability check was 3 days late because I could see someone watching for me through the curtain. I delivered letters from boys serving overseas to mothers who stood at their mailboxes with their hands pressed flat against their chests before they opened them. That is not a small thing to have done with a life. My hands show the time. They are not smooth, haven't been since I was 25. They're the hands of a man who worked outdoors every day for 3.5 decades, carrying weight in all weather. I am not ashamed of that. Before I say anything else, tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. I want to know who's out there with me. My late wife Hazel used to hold my hands in the evenings when we watched television and she would say, "These are the most honest hands I ever touched." Hazel passed 8 years ago, ovarian cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to the last morning. Our son Vance was 26 years old. He drove 4 hours from Columbia the day we got the news and he did not leave until it was over. He sat with her every night at the end. He held her hand the way she had always held mine. He got her eyes and her stubbornness, and I have thanked God for both every single day since she's been gone. I mention Hazel because she is the reason Vance is who he is. She raised him to look people in the eye no matter what their title was. She raised him to judge a man by what he does when he thinks no one's watching. She used to say, "There's a difference between good manners and good character. A lot of people have the first one and none of the second." Vance understood that before he was old enough to explain it. Vance manages a regional distribution center on the north side of Spartanburg now. He married Margot 4 years ago. Margot is smart and capable, and I had always believed, wanted to believe, that she was a decent person who had simply been raised in a world that made it easy to confuse appearances with value. Her parents, Harrison and Edith Alcott, built their money in commercial real estate. They live in the kind of neighborhood where the lawns are maintained by someone else and the cars are replaced before they show wear. They are not rude people. That's the thing about people like them. They are never rude because rudeness would require honesty, and honesty might require them to see their own behavior plainly. After Edith's call, I sat on that porch for a long time doing the math, thinking back over 3 years of polite dinners and careful seating arrangements. The Christmas party, where Edith had placed me near the kitchen because it's warmer in there. The birthday brunch, where Harrison had turned away mid-sentence when someone with a larger title walked through the door. The way Margot had gradually stopped calling me Pop when her parents were present and started calling me Boyd in the same careful, distant tone her mother used. Little things. The kind you explain away because you want to believe better of people. because making peace is easier than making a scene. I called Vance that afternoon. I kept my voice easy. "Son," I said, "your mother-in-law called this morning. She's asked me not to come Saturday, something about the atmosphere not being right." A long silence on the line, long enough that I heard him set something down. "She said what?" Not a question. A very specific kind of stillness. "I think Harrison has some business people coming," I said. "I don't believe I fit the atmosphere they're going for." He said, "Let me call you back." He called back in less than 20 minutes. His voice had gone level in the way it goes when he's already made a decision and is just telling me the shape of it. "I talked to Margot," he said. "She didn't say much, but I found the texts." A pause. "She told her mother you were just a mailman, that your hands make her mother uncomfortable at the table, that it was better to keep the guest list to people who fit the room." He stopped. "Pop, I'm sorry. I had no idea." I looked out the back window at the yard, at the fence post I'd fixed, at the garden bed where Hazel used to grow tomatoes, now just winter-brown soil. I thought about the 34 years, the weight I'd carried, all of it moving through me at once in a way I did not intend to let out over the phone. "I know you didn't," I said. "You go handle your evening. I'll warm up some soup and watch the game." No one word, the whole of Hazel in it. "No, Pop, not this time." He said he needed a couple of hours. I started to tell him not to do anything foolish. He said, "Get your good jacket, the charcoal one Mom gave you, put it on." And he hung up before I could argue. I wasn't there for the beginning of what happened next. I only know it from what Vance told me later and from what others described. So let me tell it the way I came to understand it. The dinner had been catered from a restaurant in Greenville, the kind of place where the portions are architectural and the prices are meant to communicate something about the person ordering. The food had been delivered to Vance and Margot's house by 4 in the afternoon. By 5:30, when Margot came downstairs dressed for the evening, the kitchen was empty. The refrigerator where the dishes had been stored, empty. Every covered tray, every carefully labeled container gone. Vance stood at the kitchen table with his jacket on and his keys in his hand. She asked him what was going on. He said, "Dinner's moved." She asked what that meant. He said, "You'll see." He had made 2 calls before she came downstairs. The first was to Ms. Patricia Fowler, the director of the Overbrook Community Center on Hazel Street, named for the woman who founded it in 1987. Not for my wife, though I've always found some comfort in the coincidence. I've volunteered at Overbrook for 12 years. Tuesday and Thursday lunches for seniors. I carry trays for people who can't carry their own. I sit with the veterans during the afternoon sessions and I listen, mostly, because listening is what most of them need and what almost nobody gives them. Miss Fowler picked up on the second ring. When Vance explained what he wanted to do, she said yes before he'd finished asking. The second call was to me. "Pop, the charcoal jacket. I'm 20 minutes out." He pulled into my driveway with the back of his SUV loaded, every tray from that catered dinner, covered in foil, stacked to the ceiling of the cargo space. He got out and he looked at me standing on the porch in the charcoal jacket, and something passed across his face that he collected quickly. He nodded once. "You look sharp," he said. I told him Hazel picked it out. He said he knew. The drive to Overbrook took 12 minutes through quiet December streets. The center was already lit when we pulled in. Miss Fowler had called in the regular Tuesday group and some of the VFW members who come on Saturday evenings. When we walked through the doors carrying those foil trays, the room smelled like coffee and winter coats, and the particular warmth that collects in rooms where people actually know each other. Paper decorations the youth group had made hung from the ceiling, bright construction paper turkeys left over from last month, hand-lettered signs, crayon drawings taped to the walls. None of it matched. All of it was real. A man named Dozier, 91 years old, Navy, Korean War, came over and clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to shift my balance. "Boyd," he said, grinning, "you bringing the fancy stuff tonight?" I told him something like that. He whistled low. "Long overdue." Miss Fowler helped us lay out the food on the serving tables. While we worked, Vance sent one text to Margot, the address. Nothing else. I want to tell you what I was feeling in that room, because this is the part I need to get right. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't satisfaction. Not the way people mean when they say that word. What I felt, standing in the Overbrook Community Center on a cold December Saturday, Watching Vance arrange food that was supposed to be eaten by people who had decided I didn't fit their room was something closer to grief that had finally been given permission to move. Like something held still for 3 years had been released. Like a held breath. Dozier waved me over to sit with him. He told me about a letter I'd delivered to his house in November of 2011. A letter from the VA, the one that finally granted him the disability benefits he'd been fighting for over 30 years. He told me he had cried at the mailbox, that when he looked up from the envelope I was already halfway down the block, doing my job, not knowing what I'd just put into his hands. He said, "You never knew what you were carrying, Boyd, but it always mattered." I sat very still and breathed very carefully, and I thought about 34 years, and I thought about Hazel, and I thought about every route I walked in every kind of weather, and I did not let myself come apart, but I wanted to. They arrived 20 minutes later. I heard Edith's heels first, that particular sound on tile, a step that expects rooms to rearrange themselves. Harrison followed, a large man in a blazer that cost more than my monthly pension, his face arranged in the careful pleasantness of a man who has learned to use courtesy as a shield. Margot came in last, and she looked like someone walking toward something she had already half understood on the drive over. The room did not stop for them. That was the thing. Nobody came to the door. Dozier kept talking to the man on his left. Miss Fowler was helping a woman in a wheelchair navigate toward the serving line. 2 teenagers from the youth group moved through the room offering cups of hot cider, and they offered one to the Alcotts the same way they offered one to everyone else. With a smile, no deference, no ceremony. Edith looked around with the careful expression of someone measuring a room against an interior standard it was already failing. Harrison spotted me across the room and did exactly what I expected, nothing. His face stayed pleasant and unreadable. Then Miss Fowler walked to the center of the room and raised her voice enough to carry. She said she wanted to say something before the meal, about a man she'd known for 12 years. She turned toward me. She said, "Boyd shows up every Tuesday and every Thursday, regardless of whether anyone noticed or thanked him. He carries things." She smiled. "And I mean that every way you can possibly mean it. He is the kind of man this city is built on, whether the city knows it or not. We are glad he is here tonight." The room applauded. Dozier put 2 fingers in his mouth and produced a whistle that made the teenagers jump. I stood there and looked at Miss Fowler, and I nodded, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been restless for a long time. Behind me, I heard the quality of the air around the Alcotts change. Then a man named Irvin Cross. I've known Irvin from the Thursday sessions for 6 years. A man who has survived 3 strokes and still shows up, still pulls his own chair to the table. Walked past Harrison and Edith on his way to the food. He stopped. He looked at Edith directly. He said very quietly, "Ma'am, that man right there drove to my house on his day off when I was too sick to check my mailbox. Brought my prescription notification himself. Didn't tell a soul about it." He nodded at me. Then he kept walking. The room was not silent, but in the space where the Alcotts stood, something had gone very still. I turned and looked at Margot. She was not looking at her parents. She was looking at me. What I saw in her face, I won't dress it up. It wasn't a revelation, not the movie kind. It was the specific expression of a person watching a story they've been telling themselves about someone come undone in real time. The story that said, "Boyd is just a mailman. Boyd's hands are rough. Boyd doesn't fit the room." She came toward me slowly. The room kept moving around us, silverware and laughter and Dozier winning an argument about football, and Margot stopped 2 feet in front of me and said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I let my mother believe things that weren't true," she said. "I said things about you that I shouldn't have said, about what you are and what you do and how you fit." She looked down, then back up. "It was wrong. I'm ashamed of it. And I don't have anything right now that's worth much except the truth. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry." I looked at her for a long moment. She meant it. 34 years of reading people through screen doors and across yard fences. You learn to tell the difference between an apology that wants absolution and one that just wants to be honest. This was the second kind. "I know you are," I said, "and that matters." I didn't give her more than that. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a yard you tend over time, slow and patient. You don't finish it in one evening. but you can begin." Her parents left 40 minutes later. Edith said something brief to Vance near the door. Harrison shook no one's hand. They were not asked to leave. There was simply nothing in the room that held them, and they knew it. I watched their taillights through the window and felt nothing dramatic about it, just the ordinary relief of a thing being named correctly at last. Margot stayed. She sat at a folding table and accepted a plate from one of the youth group kids and ate that catered dinner. The dinner that had been meant for a room she'd wanted to keep me out of, in a room she had never thought to enter. She was quiet. She did not perform regret. She simply sat there and was present, and that was already more than I'd had from her in 3 years. Vance and I sat together near the windows as the evening wound down. Dozier had fallen asleep in his chair with a cup of decaf in his hand. The paper decorations shifted gently overhead. I watched the room and felt for the first time in a long time that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Vance said, "I should have done this a long time ago." I shook my head. "You did it when you needed to do it." I missed things. The Christmas party. The birthday breakfast. I kept telling myself I was reading it wrong. "You wanted to believe better of people," I said. "There's nothing wrong with that. Your mother was the same way." He sat with that a moment. Then he said, "She would have loved tonight." I looked around the room. The teenagers collecting plates. Miss Fowler laughing at something near the door. Dozier's chest rising and falling. Margot helping stack chairs without being asked. "Yes," I said, "she would have fit right in." He laughed, the real kind, the unguarded kind that comes from somewhere deep, and we sat there a while longer, in no hurry at all. That was 4 months ago. Vance and Margot went to counseling, not because the marriage was broken, but because they were wise enough to know that something had drifted sideways in the quiet and needed to be brought back straight on purpose. Margot called me the following week, a real call. She asked if she could come by that Saturday and help me put up the storm windows. She said, "Vance had mentioned I usually do it alone." She showed up at 9 with coffee and work gloves. Her hands are soft, mine are not. We worked side by side for 3 hours, and she asked questions and listened to the answers. And by noon, we'd finished the windows and started something else, something slower and worth considerably more. Harrison and Edith have been quiet. That's the only card people like that have left once they've been seen clearly, and they play it. I think about that Saturday more than I talk about it. I think about Dozier and the 2011 letter. I think about the 34 years I spent moving through this city in all weather, carrying things that mattered to people I would never sit at a formal dinner with. And I think about how a room with folding tables and paper decorations held more genuine respect in one evening than any catered meal with correct glassware ever could have. Your people built you, not with money or the right connections or a table set precisely with the right forks. They built you the slow way, with time and weather and the willingness to show up. That kind of building leaves marks. Rough hands, early mornings, a way of standing that doesn't apologize for itself. If someone in your life has made you feel like those marks are a liability, I want you to hear me clearly. They are reading the wrong map entirely. The marks are the whole point. Tell me where you're listening from today. Leave it in the comments. I read everyone. And if your father is still here, if there's still a voice on the other end of the phone when you call, still a porch light on when you pull into the driveway, go to him. Don't wait for a reason. Don't wait for a holiday. Sit with him while he's there and the chair is warm and he still has time to tell you the things worth knowing. Because one day that chair will be empty and no amount of polished silver or proper atmosphere will make that silence any easier to live with. Real class is not what you serve at the table, it is who you make room for. I'm Boyd, and that was the best Saturday night I've had in years.